Hello and welcome to the Heretical Heathen Podcast. I am your host, Robert Knox. On our last episode, we took a journey through Alcibiades 1. Probably not a great journey, but I'm still getting my bearings. Well, my wife decided to listen to that, and when you're making podcasts, sometimes I like to put, well, all the time, quite frankly, I like to put music in the background. So you have something to kind of listen to, and there's not these weird pockets of just dead air. Well, she pointed out that if you listen close enough, the track actually has words in it, and there's even a point in silence where you'll hear it say, I love you. Now, I didn't notice this. Now, both me and her have been creating podcasts over the past month or two, and when we listen to music, we listen to 30 seconds maybe. We decide it's okay, and then we throw it in. Well, apparently we've learned a lesson that maybe we should be listening a little longer than that, so I don't have weird things being said in the background. So that's just a fun little Easter egg if people want to go through and re-listen to that and listen for the sounds. She said once she heard it, it's the only thing she could hear, and guaranteed now, so will you. With that out of the way, let's get to our topic. This week we're talking about scrying. The humans are obsessed with reflections. We check out our hair in shops. We stare at our own eyes in the bathroom mirror. We watch the sun bounce off a lake. But there's a difference in the kind of staring. A stare that doesn't look at a reflection, but through it. This is scrying. It's an ancient technology. Maybe our first screen. Long before the iPad or the cinema, we had the black mirror, the oil lamp, or maybe even water with oil on top. Scrying isn't just silly witches and crystal balls. It's a broad practice. If it's shiny or translucent, chances are someone, somewhere in history, has used it to try to see the future or to communicate with the other side. Let's break down the big three methods because they each carry a different energy. The first we'll go over is hydromancy, which is looking into water, and it's arguably the oldest. In ancient Greece, priests would suspend a ring by a thread into a bowl of water and read the ripples. Or they would put oil on top of water, I think that's in the Greek magical papyri, and read the images that come through. Perhaps the most famous water gazer, and a few of you old heads might recognize the name, was Nostradamus. There's all sorts of legends saying that he would sit late at night with a brass tripod in a bowl of water, staring until the water became cloudy and visions of the great king of terror began to take shape. Probably the most well-known scrying method is mirror scrying. And of course, before mirrors, we probably used things like silver or copper. There's even some famous haunted locations in which I guess feature mirrors. And if you look in them long enough, supposedly you'll see yourself age, become a skeleton, and there are often reports of seeing people standing behind you. It's really spooky. I've tried mirror scrying. No success. I know plenty of people who do mirror scrying and they seem to be very successful. I'm not sure why it works for some people, not for others. And probably the most widely used Hollywood trope, the crystal ball. You've all seen it before. It's very cliche. You see it in every movie that features a psychic. Even the idea or the word psychic itself sort of conjures image of a witch hovering over a crystal ball ready to give you your fortune. These days, people don't really use the crystal ball too much. I've seen it here or there. But in the few places that do use it, it seems they care more about the crystal than the actual scrying. For those who are into crystals, it seems that the crystal ball has become more of a status symbol. It's more about showing off how much you can afford and the fancy kind of crystal you can find than it is about the actual scrying effects. It's sort of like buying $1,000 pair of shoes or buying a new car just to show off to your friends. It's not something that I particularly enjoy. These three methods are the most common used by your standard witch. And you might be wondering, well, how do you actually do this? Now, I'm not quite a practitioner of this myself. I used a different means, which we will address a bit later. But for those interested in trying this, it's pretty simple. The first thing I'd recommend you do is take a shower or work out first and then take a shower. It's very important that you sort of get out all of that extra energy and then cleanse yourself. You want the body to be in a nice, relaxed state. You don't want to do this in the peak of the day when you feel like you could get the zoomies and just run around the house. You want to be very, very relaxed. After you've done that, I suggest you find a dark room. Darkness works the best. It lets all the subconscious material or beings from the other side send messages to you. There's something about being in the dark that makes it work. At least it seems to make it work more efficiently. If not the dark, at least a darkened room. If you want to, maybe light a candle. But you want to get your medium of choice, relax, sit down, put your mirror or your crystal ball in front of you, and you don't want to intently stare into the crystal ball or the mirror. You want to soften your gaze. You want to relax your gaze. And just sit there looking into the mirror. Don't try to force any of these images. They will eventually show up. Your face will begin to change. It'll begin to morph. Maybe you'll start seeing things in the mirror. Or, the few times I've done this, you might see nothing in the mirror, and then you'll close your eyes. And it's during that moment of closing your eyes that something pops into your mind via your third eye or your fantasia, as the Greeks might have called it. Do this for short periods at first, maybe 10 to 15 minutes. Record your results. That's it. It's very simple. And try all three methods. Find out which one works best for you. So I mentioned earlier that I don't do either three of these. I'm a practitioner of the Western magical tradition in some sense. And scrying in the Western magical tradition can be a little different, but it's not always. Some people still use the mirror, especially in organizations like the Golden Dawn. But there are other techniques, which we call scrying, that are a little more complicated. I'll talk about my practice in particular. It stems from some of the Golden Dawn work, though it is not the same thing. In the Western magical traditions, you'll start basically the same way. Get that energy out, go take a shower, get nice and relaxed. And you're going to want to do a banishing. I typically do like a lesser banishing ritual. The pentagram, mine's specifically heathen oriented, so I'm going to be drawing a circle, drawing pentagrams, vibrating divine names of the gods. Then I'm going to get my medium of choice, whether that's tattvas, whether that's tarot cards, or in my case, the runes. I'm going to draw a rune on a piece of paper. I'm going to stare at that rune. I'm going to slow my breathing down, get into a nice meditative state, stare at it the whole time, and then I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to hold that image of the rune in my third eye. I'm just going to hold that image for as long as I can. And then I'm going to imagine that image growing up into a door. And I'm going to walk through that door. And once I open that door, I'm going to explore the realm of that rune. What happens in those spaces can be very private, it can be very intimate, and it's not necessarily for others. And I wasn't even sure if I was going to talk about this, so I did a rune casting. And the runes suggested that maybe I should be sharing these things, as weird as they are. But I do feel like it's important for people involved in the pagan community, in the magical community, to start talking about these things. It's very hard for us to discuss these mystical experiences with spirits or the gods without sort of watering it down and reducing it to quote-unquote unverified personal gnosis. And if you're still using that term, remember, all your source material is unverified personal gnosis written down secondhand by Christians. Really think that through. We need to be more open about having direct mystical experiences and communication with the beings around us, whether that be the Landvitir, your Husvitir, or your gods and goddesses. So let's keep that in mind moving forward. I'm going to share with you now an experience I had with the rune Fehu. If you're not familiar, Fehu is the rune of wealth. The Old English rune poem reads, "Wealth is welcomed by everyone, yet each should deal it out freely, if they wish for a lot from the Lord." The Norwegian rune poem reads, Wealth is a source of strife among kinsmen. The wolf is raised in the woods. And the Icelandic rune poem reads, wealth is a source of strife among kinsmen, and fire of the flood tide, and path of the serpent. So in all three of the poems, we see that wealth, despite it being important, can be a problem, and it causes strife amongst people, as much back then as it does today. Times really haven't changed. So in my first scrying session, I like to start in a specific area when I do this. You can imagine yourself in a temple, a garden, or just the room you're in while you're undergoing the scrying session. So I put myself in my astral temple, and the first thing I noticed was, and this happens quite a bit, like an animal was there. I have a particular animal that seems to show up quite a bit. I don't do this practice too often, but whenever I do, it always shows up. I imagine Fehu in front of me, in red, on a giant door. And I tried to make the area, the temple I was in, as real as possible, putting different objects, plants, things, all in the room. I try to feel the air, try to feel what it smells like, feel the ground underneath my feet. And so I got up, I walked towards the door, and I opened it. And upon opening the door, I was brought into what felt like an Egyptian treasure room. And this sort of caught me off guard, because I'm not very big into Egypt, now or when I was a child. So I thought this place was sort of a strange room for me to enter. And as I was walking through this path, there seemed to be treasure on either side, and looking at the treasure were these gray beings. They didn't notice me at first, so I kept moving towards them. And as I got closer, they noticed me, and then they disappeared. Upon further meditation, it was revealed to me that these beings were something like spirits of greed. And that's all they do. They're like a hungry ghost who just wander looking for more and more treasure. No thought or drive or purpose. It's almost like a virus. It's just living to do what it does. And at the end of this path, there was a throne. So I walk past these gray beings. They disappear when they see me. And I sit on the throne. And when I sit on the throne, I'm no longer in this Egyptian temple, tomb, treasure room, whatever it is. I find myself in a long hall, like something maybe you'd see in a Viking movie, which makes more sense given that I'm a heathen. And I'm sitting in the front of this long hall. Next to me sat a woman, and before me, another woman comes out. She's carrying horns of ale, and she's scantily clad and showing off herself, which will become important later. So I got up from the throne, and I walked forward. And as I walked forward, like a being that looked like a human shape, made of light, came forward. This will happen a lot during these visions, and this is rather important. So what we have to do as magicians is we have tests we have to give these beings. We draw sacred symbols, we ask them questions, and if they fail, we know these aren't the beings we're looking for in these things. This isn't the guide of Fehu, let's say. So I give this luminous being this test, and he fails. He's a false guide. So I moved beyond him, and I found this Gandalf-like wizard, except he was green. He was wearing green. And I give him the test, and he passes. And so we have a brief interaction. It's really goofy. We're sort of just like shooting fireballs. And then I go back to the throne in this room. No longer is the woman next to me, but he sat next to me. And this woman with the alcohol comes back out, still scantily clad, still showing herself off. And I turn to the green wizard next to me, as silly as that sounds, And he told me that it doesn't matter how much you practice or how enlightened you get, you will always still be interested in earthly desires, which I thought was rather interesting. We always hear in the West that, you reach this sense of enlightenment and you're above it all, you're a guru, you're just this glowing spiritual being, but that just isn't the case. It doesn't matter how enlightened we get, we will still have a thirst for beer, we will still like good looking women. You're always going to have these earthly desires, regardless of how spiritually advanced you are. And I felt like that was a really good lesson. And Fehu is the first in the set of runes. And so I feel like that's a really good lesson, a really good first lesson, rather, to learn. It's like, yeah, keep going, keep doing this. And when you feel yourself being pulled back down to, like, I guess Malkuth is what maybe like a Kabbalist would say, just know like that's normal. It's a part of the process. It's part of what makes being human fun and exciting. It's what makes us unique. If you had your head in the clouds all the time, life would slip by and it would be rather boring. This green magician figure asked me what it is that I wanted, like what is it that I desired. And rather than coming up with a fancy answer, the first thing that came out of my mouth was, I told him I want a large house. He didn't really respond to this. Instead, he gave me a gold doubloon, is what I wrote in my notes, with the Fehu rune on it. And so I took it and I put that inside of myself. Then I told him that I want to have a stronger drive. I want to be more. And some of you might think that's a little crazy, like I work a full-time schedule, I write articles for Substack, and now I'm putting out a podcast. But I still feel mostly apathetic. I don't feel like I'm being the best person I could be. I feel like I could be better and do more. He responded by telling me that I didn't need the drive and that I already had it. From here, I got up, walked back through the door and into my temple, sat down in the chair, and found myself back in my room. It's really interesting going back over these things because despite it happening a few weeks ago, I don't quite remember all of this. Like, I don't remember grabbing the token with the Fehu rune on it and putting it inside of my body in any sense. Like, that doesn't ring a bell at all. These things are kind of like dreams, and after they happen, they fade quickly. It's like trying to hold smoke. And I suppose the next question is any of this real? And to be honest, I'm not sure how to answer that. I don't know what that means, even for a thing to be real. They're some kind of real, that's for sure. Are they all in my head? Maybe. I don't know how to frame these things. What I can tell you is, when you enter these spaces, it doesn't feel like you're the one who's creating the images. Instead, it feels like the images are happening to you. In some sense, it feels as though you were in a movie, and you're just one of the characters watching the plot take place. So if you're somebody interested in exploring these sorts of phenomenon, it's really important to both take these things seriously and not so seriously. Right? Don't get lost in the sauce. Don't think you're some special person on a spiritual quest, journeying into these spiritual realms to bring back information for the good of mankind or something. I've seen plenty of people go full like schizo doing these things, so be cautious. But at the same time, be open to the fact that maybe these things aren't all just your brain coming up with images. Maybe there's something a little more interesting going on. Maybe you're not the person making the images. And maybe these things are just for you. I don't know, what did you guys think? This is a sort of a new thing that I'm doing, I'm putting out there. Again, I had to do some divination first to see if it was okay. And I already have an Uruz scrying session done, which I could share with you as well. So let me know, are these things you want to see in the future? Should I keep doing this? Should I keep these things private? And if you happen to have made it this far, I want to thank you. Sorry if the beginning of this episode is a little hit or miss. It's a little strange. I sort of wanted to use it as a way to get into the personal discussion of these experiences, but I wasn't quite sure how to bridge that gap. So I did a brief introduction on scrying. I hope that wasn't too strange. Again, let me know in the comments of wherever you're listening to this. Again, have a wonderful night, and thank you all for tuning in.